In this video, I want to show you what is arguably one of the most powerful performance muting systems in all of Eurorack. One where you can put all the mutes to your system in one place. And that's a thing called the NO BPM Mute Performer. It's a thing that lets you perform your mutes, which is important in techno. After all, techno is the delicate art of bringing things in and out at the correct time. It allows you to collect all of the mutes of your system into one place. You can expand this with multiple expanders up to 72 channels. I'm muting a lot of triggers here, but I can mute CV, and I can also mute audio with this. And also the channels cascade downwards, so I can mix with this. This uses Vactrols. In fact, we can also mute and unmute audio clicklessly, like this. And in this way, you can merge all of the things that you want to mute into one place. And there's an extra thing you can do as well. In the background, I've been muting something else, which is MIDI. What? Yeah, no, really. You also can send MIDI CCs with the Mute Performer. And so in these 3 channels in the bottom right corner, I can individually mute elements on my Roland TR-8. And I've mapped these to high, mid, and low tom. This is done with a web editor. The web editor is a online app basically that lets you, with a MIDI interface, talk to the Mute Performer and set it up so that some of the channels can send MIDI for you. You can also have it so that it sends program changes, which is pretty wild, so that you can have scenes and things that trigger and create program changes in your Electron box and all other manner of good things that people like to do with Electron boxes. The other thing that we can do is we can clock our mutes with this. Oh yes, friend. That means that if I take a trigger and I feed it into the clock input, then what it will do is quantize the mute. I can push this just before the end of a bar and it will mute at the correct time. By the way, is on channel 7 here. I'm sending a trigger at the start of every bar, and in so doing, it will perform the mute when it hears the trigger. Very nice. And if we had more sparse triggers, then we could queue up the mutes, do a bunch of things, and they would all happen at the end of the bar. Speaking of queuing, that's another thing that we can do here, which is, if I hold this little button, then I'm able to pre-mute things, work out what I want to have muted, and then when I let go, according to this trigger, then those mutes will be carried out. So I can think, what do I want? I want some drums and bass. But that's a 2-handed operation. There is a 1-handed way you can do it. If you push this button above it, you get this little blue light. And then with one hand, I can come and disengage things and then release it. And it releases on the beat. So we're going to get our rave stabs and we're going to mute the kick. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Yeah. We can also link channels in stereo. That's what I have here. This is actually the audio from my Ecto Core. And it is coming through here, so I can mute it on and off without a click. And we can stereo group channels. So if I push either of these buttons, then this stereo element will be muted. Rather nice. And so I am just exploring mutes on the beat. Yeah, nice. Oh, that's nice. But I said earlier, you could mix on this thing. I've got a little bit of mixing going on here. We can cascade these channels down, which is to say that if I have two things plugged into the inputs and only one thing plugged into the bottom output, then as I unmute these elements, they will get mixed together. And what I have here is the noise plethora from DeFaco. And I've got my 8, the upcoming Random 8, sending some modulation via these channels. And so I can unmute modulation that is going to this. And in fact, I have 2 channels of it. And so this could be like 2 LFOs or something, and you could mix the 2 LFOs, and you could be using this to choose when or which element comes in. But in this instance, I'm using it to mix CV. Yeah. And so in this way, we can just explore mutes and perform them on the beat by pre-queuing things up so we can have big switcheroos with loads of things changing at the same time. And I can spend a little bit of time thinking in that 8-bar lead up, what is it that I want to happen? And if I want to do it one-handed, I can do that. Yeah. But that's not all, because using the scene buttons, we can have scenes of mutes perform a track. What's a scene? A scene is a collection of mutes, and we can have 4 different scenes, and we can have 8 different banks of scenes. So what this lets us do is take a modular synth and actually make a track with it, because you can mute and unmute components and save those and then kind of just perform all these mutes, all these pre-thought out mutes as part of your track. And you can obviously mute individual things as you go and play around, but it's just a really fun way that with all these elements, I can basically jam out a track. This is scene 1. And I can mute elements as we go. And back to scene 3.
To be alright.
And of course I can mute individual elements from this, and in so doing it saves it as part of the scene. And this is how we do it. You can copy and paste scenes as well, so you can really build up an arrangement with care. And I mentioned before you've got banks of them. If we come in here, we've got 8 banks, and so I can load up another bank of mutes and go beyond the 4 here. You load that up, it will come in on the beat. Here it is. This is the first bank. nice little breakdown there. Whoa. There's one final thing that I need to show you. The final thing is called Solo. And Solo is a feature that was added in a firmware update to the Mute Performer. And it's another way of engaging mutes that complements what is already there. You do it by pushing these two buttons together. And when these two ones are lit, then when we push the buttons, it will solo the element that we select. We can use this to do kind of little spot effects, or we can even do little kind of sub-mixes of mutes and then back out of them to where we were before. So this particular arrangement of mutes will be remembered, and I can then just do this other sort of custom mix. So now we're hearing these 5 elements, and I can bring in my TR8 toms, my break, and when I'm ready, I can back out. And we're exactly where we were beforehand. So you push the two things together, and you get these little spot mutes, as it were, solo mutes. But we can also use cues in this mode as well. If I hold the bottom button, it goes purple, and I can cue up mutes. So for example, if I wanted the rave stabs to come in, I could do that and take away the hats. Like that. I held Q, and while I'm in this view, I can choose what I want to be swapped. And so it's like a whole other layer that can sit on top of what is already there. Because you can then drop back into the mutes you were in. So in this way, it's very like immediate and performative. If you're like, I love this groove, but I just want to take it somewhere else. Oh yeah, that's nice. Do you see? You can drop back in. So solos are just another way of applying mutes. And of course, we can then combine that with scenes to do all of the things that we've been doing up to this point. And so in this way, we have the ability to mute and unmute in pretty much all the ways that one might wish. And we can cue things or just mute immediately, and so be as prepared or off the cuff as you wish.